Hello, you beautiful people. Another episode of Uncle Talk. And today we're going to talk about exams. Hello, Rohan.
Hello, Uncle. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me. Really excited to be on the show today. Woo.
Great. So, how is going on? How is everything? Everything is good?
Everything is good. Everything is good. I mean, I hear that today we're going to be talking about exams. That's going to be interesting. It's a big topic. Lots of interesting things to talk about there, right?
A lot of pain, good and bad memories.
Yes, exactly. Man, it's such a huge thing, right? It's been a part of so many of our life. I mean, everyone's life. I think there's one thing in common that we all have, regardless of race, religion, gender, everything. It's exams, right? Like exams is the one thing everyone went through, and everyone has something to say about it. So yeah.
The funny part is when you refer to religious. That's interesting. Maybe we need some sort of research to find the correlation between people, family religious, and their reaction to exams. Maybe there is something like that. I think there should be. Definitely, there is something. There's should be sort of correlation. Maybe not causation, but should be some sort of correlation. So. Okay. What do you think? What? Tell me something a little bit about your own experience because you were telling me something before we record.
Yeah. My experience before exams. So, like in general, I was a pretty decent test taker. I would say I would get pretty good marks. I was a bit of a I didn't do so well when I first started out. I was more into like football and stuff. Yes, I'm showing off. I'm showing off a little bit, but it started really bad. I actually was bad at exams right up to the point I was like maybe 12 or 13, and then competition with friends kind of pushed me, and I started to do pretty well. And people used to start to ask me questions. I was like, oh, okay, nice. Now I like getting good grades in exams because people think I'm smart, and that was a nice feeling. But like the one thing that I can always remember about exams for me was just the my parents were not super mean about it, but I know that subtly they were always, I think naturally all Asian families have this thing where it's like, why not better, or that you can always do better, right? Like no matter how good you do or how hard you try, it's like
really painful.
It's
you did
just
well,
but why not? So the famous line in my house, especially from my dad, I would get this a lot from my dad, is why not 100? So and I think so many Asian kids have this, especially Malaysian kids. I think they had this experience anyway. It's just like, hey dad, I got 97, and things like, oh, why not 100? It's like, it's just one of those super common things. Yeah.
It looks like in their perspective, default is 100. Default is 100.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you have to explain why you got, for example, 99. You're not in charge to explain how you got 99.
Yeah, exactly.
What if default is 100? So why we go to the exam? So what's the point of getting 100?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just like the focus, right? The focus on the mistake versus the job well done is always so it's so polarizing. It's so confusing, I think, growing up with that.
Yeah, it's coming to sort of perfectionism that you know what, if for example, let's say you're an expert artist and you're in charge to criticize, you are in charge. So what you're going to do when you look at a painting, first you see the part which is missed. You don't look at how beautiful is that, because you paid to criticize. But I don't know, our parent, nobody paid them to criticize.
I'm not saying them.
No, I feel maybe there was something behind the curtain in between them and the school. The school didn't give the money.
School is paying them. Oh. Now it makes sense. That makes sense now. I get it.
I answered this historical question. Okay, let us start our today question and answering. Let's go through. What do you have for me?
All right, great. Sure. So let's start talking about exams. So first of all, I'd like to start off by saying that, what do you like? So of course, like I just said, everyone has an opinion about exams, right? We all have thoughts about what exams meant to us, what it feels. What's your opinion? Do you think standardized exams, grading systems, are they still relevant now? Maybe is what I should say, from when we were in school to now. Like, is it still something people should care about, think about? Is it relevant?
Okay, interesting question. I don't want to say is irrelevant. I try to say something different. It's very subjective to the learning methodology that we are applying in that school or that academic environment. If we are
Mm.
focusing on memorization, definitely exam is something useful, because I need to do that, right? If imagine I give you a kind of like a kind of, let's say, a bunch of formula in mathematics, and what matters to me that you remember them. That's all. So the
Mm.
easiest and fastest and fair, the most fair approach is the exam, paper exam, or okay, not paper, iPad and pencil. So nothing changed. So if it is memorization, it's like that. But imagine if the learning methodology is project-based learning, PBL. There's no any kind of, so then how can I do the exam? Exam is that in that sense, exam is irrelevant.
Mm.
There's no way I can't give you paper exam because I gave you project. Let's say I'm a biology teacher, and I'm going to talk about a virus and COVID time. So maybe I divide students to group from the PBL, means from the beginning, entire of the school and system is project based,
Mm.
not like
Yes.
the normal classroom that they give some projects to. No, I'm not talking about
Yeah.
that. That
It's
means
like
from
an
the
add-on at the end, right?
Bravo. It's not
Exactly.
add-on. It's the main course. The main course. That means from the beginning of the course, we give them some projects, maybe one, maybe multiple.
Mhm.
But through that projects, they learn, they research, they figure out what is the best vaccines or the approaches or how much. So if this is the model of learning, so the exam is not the way of the assessment. So there are different ways, right? So to my
Yeah.
answer is it's about learning methodology. And then but I think memorization is maybe one of those classic and oldest approach that been used in many years for many places, many people, and it's very kind of in human mindset. Everyone should memorize, everyone can memorize, so it's not
Mm.
difficult, and every
Yeah.
school can give these books and as kids to read it two, three, four, 5 times, because it was very old. It means even when you want to learn a music, you have to remember, you have to repeat and repeat and repeat, and eventually you remember. So that's why it became so vividly available option. So if you
Mhm.
are into a school that focus on that approach, yes, it's relevant. That's the only way. That's the only,
Mm. I got it.
but now the world evolved. That's so my answer for
Yeah.
that particular question is this.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense because like you think about it, like among all the skills, right? If we're evaluating people on over a set of skills, memorization, like you said, is the most common denominator among those skills, right? Like like you said, everyone can memorize, or that's what maybe we all think that everyone can memorize, or everyone's good at memorizing, or should be good, but it's not necessarily, like you said, a fair evaluation, but it seems like the most fair given the knowledge that we have about like a general populace of people, right? So again, it's sort of like almost like a blanket policy, right? We blanket policy
True,
right,
true,
how we
true.
evaluate people, which is actually
True, true. It's
yeah,
very
that's what
relevant
it
in
is.
what you expose the students. So what is unfair is I give you the approach A and I use another assessment.
Mm.
What is more unfair when there are a lot of opportunities to not follow that memorization methodologies and still I'm
Mm.
doing that. While there are a lot of
Yeah.
other alternatives, the world changed and kids and children they learn in many different ways. That means learning already shifted from traditional school to internet to YouTube's to games to parents to friends. It's evolved. You can't stop. Evolution is natural. You can hold it. You can hold it in a kind of thing. That's not gonna
Mm.
work. So that is super unfair. That's it. Another things. We're not talking about this topic. We're talking about the exam and the school. But I want to really clear this from the very beginning of our conversation.
Yes, exactly, exactly. I totally see it. I see your point. It makes sense that exams are this way. So what about the fact that like, you know, in any system that we come up with as human beings, typically there's bias, right, to the creator of that system, right? And I think that's an interesting question to ask, right? Is how do you feel about the fact that grading systems, if we are going with something like exams, where there's a lot of maybe there could be a sense of objectivity or subjectivity, right? For example, in an exam, there's sometimes the objective questions, ABCD type questions. There are also subjective questions where it's sort of open-ended answers and things like that, right? Do you think there could be bias involved since most of the grading practices we have are, I would say, like teacher-centric, right? They revolve around being able to accommodate the ability of a teacher to mark or check something, right? Is there bias in that? Do you think there's a question of fairness then?
True. It's a very interesting question. You know what? Look at the multi choices exams that typically used for even university entrance examination. as any standard around the world. So there are some ways to reduce the human bias, because it's not like someone should read. Now computers can check it. There are machines that
Right.
you fill up all those kind of things and put in the machine read all of them. This is
Mhm.
the time of the paper. You know what? My
Yeah.
university entrance examination was between me and around million students in one day, 4 hours, and for entire of the high school and secondary school. So we
Mhm.
were fighting. It's just like kind of I'm sitting in a kind of big examination hall, and this paper is between me and the best university in country and my future. So imagine such a kind of scenario. But I knew that there is no human bias, because machine gonna check it. That's all. So it was fair. Look at that approach. But now look at the part that teachers should look at the answer. Okay, should evaluate the answers and then look at all of them and then see and then think how much you're gonna get. That is the part that definitely there are always been cases that many students accuse their teacher that it's not
Exactly.
fair and this and that. Sometimes right, sometimes not right. But there is something. You know what that people typically as teacher, one of the technique the teacher they use is a normalization,
Mhm.
right? Because we have this common belief that average is what is happening more often. So
Mhm.
it means that I believe that if I have 50 students in my class, that means there is a normal bell-shaped normal
Mhm.
normal diagram, and average occupy the most of my students. So in this model, two groups will be out: those
Mhm.
talented students and those poor or weak students, slow learners, because they are not in the average.
All right.
So they get the bias. Actually they get the bias.
Mm.
Okay, this is coming. And also this effect, famous effect, Pigelman effect. The
Mhm.
Pigelman effect is like this tendency of, I know you are poor students, so that
Yeah.
impact in my mind. When I get the exam paper, this is Rohan, I
That-
know that he's not gonna
that's so
get
true.
this. Okay, or you are a smart, I know. So this
Yeah.
is coming from those that are not in the average. I can't have
Mm.
this because for average students, actually, I react better. I have been teacher, and I remember I have more chance of making some negative or wrong decision or bias, let's say, toward talented students, because I know they're very good. So before
Mm.
I see the paper, my
Yes.
mind is ready. My mind it has this in whatever he or she gonna write is good. I know that.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
or if
I. I have a great story about this, by the way, but I'll let you finish
Gary,
and then I'll talk about
okay,
it.
and then but if you are a poor student, so it doesn't matter, I know you are poor, but maybe you did really good, maybe you really worked hard. So these are things happening from that normal try to normalization, and we do this normalization bias toward the life. That means we maybe make a decision when we purchase some things, we try to be around that average, and we lose offers in due to the other end of this normal distribution. So if exam is mechanical, I'll say mechanical. I mean, it's computational, it's automated, it's apps, it's technology, so we can reduce it, we can remove it. But if it's just coming through that way of human impact, yes, there is this, especially Pigelman effect. Give me your story.
Nice. Yeah, so I again totally agree with that. And totally makes sense. And now the fact that you said that, I look back and that's why I remember this story. So I'd like to preface this and just make a disclaimer out there. I'm generally a very honest, good-hearted person. I don't like to cheat or do things like that. But there was this one time in school, and on all the Malaysian people out there, Malaysian students, you know what I'm talking about. There's this idiotic, I'm just going to say it's an idiotic subject called moral studies, right? Which is a total waste of time. It's pure memorization, and it's just like reading from this book, and you like to spit out answers, onto your exam. And it's just like, I don't know. For me, I think of it as a kind of like a brainwashing thing, or I don't know. They're just trying to, because I think, with Islamic students, they have Islamic studies. And so naturally for the non-Islamic students, they have to have a filler subject, and that's moral. And so it's this just dummy exam that's such a waste of time. But anyway, for one of our main, exams at the end of the year, which is in Form 5, we had an exam called SPM. And then before the main SPM exam, we have trial examinations, right? And of course, I was a bit more of a science student, so I focused more on my science subjects, my biology, chemistry, all that kind of stuff. And so I was studying for those. I didn't study for moral. I didn't want to waste my time, right? Like it just felt like such a waste of time for me. So when it came to the trial exam, it's not the real exam; it's a dummy exam. It's just for fun. And I, me and I had good friends. I had some very very good friends in high school. They were very kind, and we did this thing in the trial exam for moral, which is we basically swapped papers. So I basically just my friend after and shout out to you, Zewin, my friend. He filled out like he finished his exam so fast, and he just gave me. We quickly swapped papers because we're sitting behind in front of each other, and he filled out basically my entire exam paper. Like he just did it, right? It was so nice.
Wow, that's so good.
and here's the best part of the story, right? When we get the exam results back, guess who gets higher marks? I get higher marks. It's like, what is that? It doesn't make sense. But that just shows you, right, the subjectivity. Like, look at that right there. And I think it was because of this effect that you talked about, right? Because I think the teachers maybe saw me as more of a slightly good student, maybe, right? And that's it right there. You see the effect happen in real life. So that's a real story. That's not, I didn't make that up. That's a real story.
Even now took 5 minutes to prepare us to tell us about your cheating. Even now it's difficult for you to say it. I know it was a shame, and now you feel better. Do you feel better now?
I feel fine because it was moral and I don't care about that. So, yeah.
How do you feel now, Rohan?
Oh, I mean, it's like a weight lifted, It's like I've wanted to tell this to so many people for so long. But
what do you think about yourself, Rohan?
I think I have very good friends. That's what I think.
Yeah, the moral part of this story is friendship is awesome.
Yeah, right. See, I was above moral. I had a higher level of perception about moral. So yeah.
I feel your friend act like a wingman, but for the exam.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
exactly what it was.
You're kind of a place to find a girlfriend.
Oh man.
Nice. True. It is. We're human. We're human. I mean, it's not like gonna teach your fault or whatever. It is. Even behavioral economy utilize this concept in marketing.
Exactly. Yeah. So. Right. Exactly. So building off that, right? Building off that whole story. Obviously.
When Apple release a new product, you're okay to be expensive. You're okay for that.
Yeah.
This is a sort of Piggelman effect. If, for example, another brand that typically is popular with the cheap, low cost, so you expect that one. I mean, this is a part of human, But when it comes to your poor paper and your life, that's a different story.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's so true. And again, building off that, the grading scales that we have, right? We have so many different, I guess, types of grading scales, but they're all relatively similar. And most of them, of course, help teachers to see how a student is performing, right? You talked about that bell-shaped curve. It helps people assess sort of the average and who is above average and all those kind of things, right? That's what these scales do. It helps, of course, with college admissions committees, universities. It lets teachers know maybe who needs a bit more help, who is doing better or worse, right? Don't you think grading scales, irrespective of the method, like you say, the examination method, do you think grading scales are a valuable thing, having these curves, right, that let us assess where a student is?
I like to refer back to what I said for the first question. Definitely, we need assessment. So if we separate assessment from grading, then we have less tendency to be, kind of like a little bit scary or fear of change, because assessment is there. But how you use the assessment, I don't know. Maybe grading is one of them when you have done a lot of memorization. For example, look at this, and I mean, definitely we need some metrics. We need metrics. Even look at the Instagram; they're full of metrics, likes, messages. So we need you as a person. One of the main goal of education is metacognitive abilities. We want to make sure you reach to a point that you get that self-awareness about yourself, to evaluate yourself properly, to be able to compare yourself with your yesterday and your future and other people. For example, I want to say, hey, I'm an expert computer scientist. So do I know why? What is my level? Which area I can talk about it? So you see that there have been too much of this responsibility outside of human mind. That means we let a
Mm.
school to make a decision. So that's why a school came up with many approaches to compare you with someone else. And this became a habit because it's fun. So I don't need to be responsible for my evaluation. Teacher will tell me, university will tell me, my salary will tell me, university exam level. So we get used to these leaderboards to let us know where we are. So
Mm.
extrinsic approaches, and we miss that intrinsic part. So if you
Yeah.
ask me, what is the negative side effect of these approaches? I say the intrinsic part. We're not working on the part that you evaluate yourself. You see, we're so
Mm.
happy and worry about our grade, but we never been like this about our own evaluation.
Mhm.
And if you do evaluation, most of the time you do it wrong. You either think that you're so bad, but you're not like that, or you think you're too good, but you are not like that. That means we have an illusion
Mm.
of where is my level. So because society became like this, so we rely on that standard outside because we want to hire
Mm.
people. We want to let you go to the surgery room and do the surgery on over a person. I can't rely on your own self-awareness because there were no any kind of a school system to work on that specifically. I hope this happened, and I think it's
Mhm.
happening. Okay, so the assessment is should be there. The way of the assessment is very relevant to that where you came. Now, if I want to hire a new staff for keto code, most probably this staff education system is classical, is traditional. There are
Yes.
now schools in the world, especially some wise societies, that are utilizing project-based learning. There are schools. There are schools is really interesting that their methodology is design thinking.
Mhm.
It's the way of mathematics, biology, and everything. So how can I assess students coming from this school with exam paper? There's no way to do that.
No way. Yeah.
Or now, if hire a person, 90% this person is not coming from those schools. Okay, so
Mm.
that person doing something different. But eventually, this will be a norm. So, am I clear about the question?
Yeah, yeah. I think that makes sense. It's one of those things where I think naturally the world is realizing that the skills or the output of people who are used to being assessed using these sort of more, I would say, let's call it competitive metrics or competitive environments, isn't enough. It does fulfill some things, right? It helps produce some kind of people, which is valuable still. But there's definitely a bracket of people that we are not producing, right?
Mhm.
Maybe in the areas of creativity, critical
True,
thinking,
true.
computational thinking, design thinking. Those are the people we need more of, and we're not producing them. And maybe that's something interesting that we can talk about now. Like, so but maybe before we jump in there, I just had one question that popped into my mind when you talked about this, and it was actually relevant to the experience I was kind of talking about just now when we started the conversation. I said that for me, I was quite a poor student up till maybe I was just playing football basically up till 13, and then at 13 years old I decided, oh, I'm going to study, right? And the reason I decided to study was because I found that my friends cared about it, and I was like, oh, it's like now my friends are interested, and that competition to see who is better in the class, who is worse in the class, it was there. And that helped me study, do well, and actually motivated me to learn. Maybe it was a wrong kind of extrinsic motivation. Maybe if I think about it now, I'm like, that was not probably the best reason to be excited to learn, but it got me through my exams and it helped me. And I think for a lot of kids, I think I would say have a similar experience to me. Is it a good thing? Is it a good thing, even as a temporary solution, just to get kids maybe, sort of motivated to start sort of competing with their friends?
You you point out something that this is my I think my opinion about this. When we raise, what we're talking about is school. We always forget that why primary school, secondary school, high school are far more important than the college and university. These years, 12 years, belong to the age of every human being that we form our future personality. We learn things that we can't get rid out of them easily, especially when we're in the primary school. That's why they're so sensitive. If I raise a generation that the only way that they can survive is by getting high mark, and of course, competitive environment will be formed. And what is happening here? The goal is the grade. Goal is the grade, right? Because there's no any other way. That means your mind goal
Right.
is to
Yes.
get the grade. So to get the grade, you know what's gonna happen? you start to come up with shortcut solutions.
Mm.
We are raising shortcut generation. We are
Yeah.
raising managers, leaders, engineers that they learn in their 12 years of childhood time that I want to get good mark. Should I sit down and spend a semester on that? Because who does the one that enjoy from mathematics?
Mm.
But I found out how to do that. My mommy and daddy can hire my teacher, come to my house and help me and find some questions and give me some hints relevant to the questions. Yeah, I got it. Or I do some sort of cheatings, or I try to memorize only the part that I know it will come to the exam. And many kids
Exactly.
they know how to do that because how many times you can create math questions from one book for 20 years. So questions will be repeated. Or I remember in my time for the university exam, it was like around 7, 8 books, 30,000 questions for math only. And if you go through all of them, there were no possible you see a new question. No possible. 30,000 only math. Only math. Okay,
Wow.
let's not talk about the physics and chemistry and biology. And we had something like that, moral things in the entrance of university and
Yeah.
history and language and other stuff. So my concern always is this: we are raising kids. They're not. The goal is the grade, not the process. So
Mm.
you learn shortcut on everything.
Mm.
Your job, in your relationship, in your even choosing a food, even
Yeah.
everything. So that's the damage, the true damage.
Mm. That's so prevalent. I feel, especially to me personally, like looking back now, I think, yeah, you know what? That it justifies, I guess, any means, right? As long as I get the grade, and that's part of the problem, right? Because in the real world, like any means is not necessarily a good thing. Sometimes the quality that we lack, we cannot bring that back when we take shortcuts, right? We cannot get back the quality of the experience of the process, as you said. I think that's super
I'm telling you,
relevant to today.
Rohan, my personal experience and how often in the last 5 years, when from my own team members and people I hired or some of them they left Keto Code, I've sensed these shortcut approaches in people
Mm.
to do. It means like always, nobody choose their main process, which required practicing, learning, engagement. We think of shortcut, shortcut in design. And then when I look at the politic, economy, look at many other things. I can sense that approach is coming from environment that goal became great. Great became goal.
Mm. Yeah, wow, that's good. I'm thinking about it now, just pondering like, how much of me is still, how much of that me is still there, you know? Because I think a lot of it's gone. I think like I'm much less competitive than I was before, but I'm thinking like, how much of it is still there because of the way I was taught about, you know, grades and competing and stuff like that. Wow, very interesting. What do you think, like in terms of the ability, you know, of the grading system to accurately reflect, you know, what a student is able to sort of learn and apply, right? Because one of the things that I think about when I think about this, you know, you talk about the shortcut method, and I'm thinking about it for myself. You know, when even though I was competitive, and I will say that I definitely did take some shortcuts in some subjects like moral, as I told you
Yeah,
about.
started out some of it.
There were definitely some subjects that I was interested in that I did spend the time and I didn't take the shortcuts, right? And so like I totally understand that the grading system is making it easier for people to choose shortcuts, or is motivating the choice of shortcuts, right? But for the situation when people don't take shortcuts, for the situation when people actually continue to learn as regular, they work hard, they take the long path. Maybe they have an interest. For example, for me, it was chemistry. I was super into chemistry, so it didn't matter it was not about taking shortcuts. I really wanted to understand everything about it. And do you think? But do you think grading systems like actually help people like assess, you know, their knowledge? That's always one thing I felt like, you know, like there were people, for example, who would get similar marks to me, I was always highest in chemistry anyway. But even though people got similar marks to me, I always felt like I could explain it better. I always felt like I was more capable of explaining something versus other people. And that from a competitive side, I was a bit like, that's annoying, right? They can get almost same marks as me, but they don't actually understand it as well as me, right? I feel like that's another side of it, which is like the grading system almost allows people who don't understand something well enough to get scores or marks that are not not really representative of their understanding, and that's sometimes unfair to the people who actually understand really well things, right? Yeah. What do you think about that?
I think we already answered this question. The thing is this: what became gold is just the ability of you to do memorization and be able to do stress management, to have access to your memory, to bring them out again and copy paste in your exam paper. Okay, because these exams are not targeting your creativity. Okay, I have seen exam paper target creativity. I have seen it. Okay, for
Oh,
example,
nice.
let's say they pick up a topic, one question, write about it, whatever you think, come up with this. Especially for art, became more popular. For example, the question was design a house with disability. So then artists try to design on a paper. Those that they have been, but back to the standard school, it's not like that. It's just heavily based on the memorization. So, are you? What there are a lot of characteristics come to the game. If you have the personality to memorize better and remember and recall immediately, if you are a person can manage your stress or your anxiety when you are in the exam, if you do have concentration like sitting down in one place on a chair in the paper, there are a lot of things, a lot of parameters. That means that exam definitely, let's make this clear, this exam is not targeting your learning. And I don't, as far as I remember, I think it's so wrong. If I don't know if anyone claimed this is about learning. This is just about a memorization. How well you memorize. We assume that if look at this wrong assumption. We assume that if Rohan interested in math, really, literally, so that means he every day work with math. So he solve a lot of questions. So he remember everything, right? He remember everything because he's working with all of them. So in 1 hour exam with 20 questions, he should be able to answer all of them. So look at this conclusion. How we got the conclusion? 1 hour exam paper. Who said this is the result of if Rohan worked with mathematics every day? If I am coding every day, you bring me here and talk to me about maybe I can talk. But if you give me a project, I will do the codings in 1 weekend. I give it back to you. But maybe I can't talk. Uh, I'm sorry, I can't. Sorry, I can't. So then I'm the loser. This sort of the exam, which doesn't care about many human parameters, many parameters. Even I remember that maybe you have tummy, stomach. You can sit down and do the exam. It's simple, very simple, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't care about this stuff. Or maybe you reach to the examination hall late. That's happened to me. So it was a math exam
Yeah.
and I failed because I reached at the end and I have to take it again
Oh.
at university. So that's one of my interesting story. So and it was mathematics that I always been engaged with this, but I just reached it because it was traffic and reach. The exam was
Oh
8 a.m. I
man.
reached 9:30 and I couldn't
Wow.
answer in 30 minutes. So it was just what I mean is this even not only you can do the exam, there are other parameters like this. So definitely, this is not designed. You know what? Exam is like one measurement. For example, if you measure temperature of a liquid that you don't know what is this liquid, temperature just give you one thing. You have to do more analysis, right? You can't say,
Yes.
oh, it's 32 degrees, so this should be acid. No, it's not going to work like that. You have to dig in. You have to understand. So exam is just only one. Maybe you fail in that one measurement, but if it could be more measurements, you got a lot of more kind of things. So this one-dimensional assessment is the issue. So this is wrong. Looks like you see a person with looks like wise and glass and makeup and suit. You don't consider that person a kind of academic or wise person. You have to go and talk and do the conversation. So this one metric looks like just interface.
That now just makes perfect sense. I think I really started to understand now the effect of it, because yes, when you have one metric that's measuring everything and everyone's relying on that metric, you naturally produce one-dimensional people who are just, they can only think that way, they are bound to this way, and there's nothing else, right? So that obviously then would affect creativity. That's why we're not getting very much creative people now in the industry, right? Because schools are just not producing that. They're producing a one type of person, right? So this must have a horrible effect on creativity. And as someone who, obviously, you're a business owner, you run a business, you've employed lots of different people. How have you seen the impact of this on like creativity, or how do you even like inject it or bring it into team members who, most of them, as you said just now, are coming from an education system that just didn't allow them to be creative?
You know, it reminds me of something really interesting. You know, when I say that there's only one metric, so entire of a school system, parents, children, teachers, everybody think of one metric, right? That means everything is one metric. So that means a very, very one-dimensional society, one-dimensional society. So graduates, those graduated from the system, they can't think in a multidimensional because they never assess in a multidimensional way. They never learn for multidimensional purposes. So they won't create products with the multi-dimension. And if anyone created anything, we knows that there are a lot of dimensions to assess and evaluate a product. I want to answer you about creativity. There is something very important about creativity. It is my own experience as an entrepreneur that creativity means take risk. One of the very important things connected to creativity means take risk. From even sitting down and come up with different ways of thinking means all taking risk. And if I graduated from the school that the goal is the grade, means do not take risk.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're gonna lose the A. Just follow the same as book, same as teacher. Why you want to take risk? Duh. It's not like that. Because you just sit down and read it. That's so this is definitely again shortcut. One-dimensional people. Not a risk taker, not at all, not at all. Because so how you expect creativity? You know what I mean? How you expect. So if those, I think for now, those are creative, they just happen. Randomization,
Exactly.
like the ability happen in evolution that some animals they could survive, and some animals they couldn't. You know, it just like that. That means creativity today is not the outcome of well-designed education system. It's not like that. It's noises. It's outliers. Those creative people, they are outliers of current education system, classical education system.
Yeah, wow, that makes so much sense. That's again, like that's why you see so many of these famous entrepreneurs are people who dropped out of school, right? There's this idea that big entrepreneurs, famous ones, the Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, they dropped out of school, and it's interesting because it's probably because they basically had a very violent negative reaction to these,
True.
one-dimensional
All of
metrics,
them,
right?
they talk against the school. You see them when you listen to it, it became a kind of stereotype. If
Yeah.
you see a tech entrepreneur, most probably he gonna or she gonna talk about something like
Yeah.
this with the school.
Yeah, this is like out of 10 entrepreneurs, how many dropped out of school? That's should do some research on that. Nice. Well, so then, okay, we talked about the fact that this one metric thing doesn't work. It's not going to bring out creativity. It's going to, bring out these one-dimensional assessment type of people. What other metrics can we consider? What about non-academic factors, things like attendance, participation, behavior? There's so many different things, that can be maybe factored into to us a sort of a grading or an assessment, right? Like what do you think some of those factors are moving forward? We've seen, of course, with other, there's some very, very big, like changes happening around the world in some countries, right? We're seeing Finland, we've talked about, I think even Singapore started stuff. A lot of the Nordic countries are kind of revitalizing stuff about their education systems. What are some of the other metrics that, policymakers, institutions like us, like Keto Code, what are the factors we can consider when computing an academic or even sort of broader kind of assessment about a student?
Okay, we're living in the age of computers, right? I mean, like now, computer is the printing machine of 15th century. Computer is the machine and telegraph and electricity of 18th century, and then so it means that solutions they should be computational solution. For example, how come now it's so legitimate in YouTube algorithms are able to evaluate contents and generated for people in audience and subscribers in the channels. So that means we already have an example, working example of algorithms that they are comparing properly in a way that a huge society of the YouTubers and those watching YouTubes. They're working together. So we do have
Mhm.
algorithm. Why not this algorithm come and get engaged? The question is, what sort of changes should happen in a school system, curriculum, content to be able to be used by to apply those algorithms over
Mm.
these things, right? For example, let's say a video itself doesn't have anything at first glance, right? But if I tell you more information, meta information about video, how many
Mhm.
times viewed, demographic information of who viewed these videos, which countries they viewed this, how many they like, how many dislike, how many comments. You see, I'm giving you more numbers, more
Mhm.
metrics. And if I give you all this
Yes.
information about all billion other videos uploaded over the internet, and if you are data scientists, you can come up with an algorithm to sort and organize and then come up with fantastic information that no human can do that. This is the
Mhm.
job of the data science. So I wish to see that soon data scientists, game designer, game developer, behavioral economists come and take over the school curriculum design than those
Mm.
that are designing the school curriculum at the moment, because they know nothing about gamification, they know nothing about this stuff, and they don't care, because who care? It doesn't matter student they have engagement or not. If you're a game designer in a company, if you do something wrong, you're going to lose all of your users. So you are so into
Mm.
come up with all approaches to engage people. You think of the color, you think of the font, you think of the design, you think of every single things. And behavioral economy, beautiful concepts. All these
Yes.
things, if they come, then we can have, so definitely, especially the one that you refer, behavioral model. These
Mhm.
cognitive models are very important. Metacognition, that we hopefully talk about in another video, has seven stages, seven important stages. It starts from it's really interesting. I like we talk about this because it's relevant to exam maybe another time when we go more in details. Within the seven stages that we want to build in human mind, the first stage called remembering. Remembering means the ability that you remember names, dates, facts, or facts information. So you can describe, you can memorize. Okay, you can define. For example, I tell you, define for me the meaning of, for example, profit. Define
Mhm.
for me the meaning of, for example. So this is the first layer, stage. And this is where the school is stopped.
Right.
The second layer, called understanding. So understanding means make sense out of those facts and information that you memorized. Some teachers in a school, they reach to this level. Okay, if teacher was good, not the system. So
Mhm.
understanding at this level, we talk about explaining, illustrating, interpret for me, summarize the information that you learn here, discuss about it. But in the previous stage, we were talking about define, find,
Mhm.
describe. So then the third layer is applying, which no school does this. Use the information that you memorize and now you can understand it, you can make sense out of them, but apply it in a situation. So this is what we
Mm.
really missed it in a school. Then
Yeah.
here is the part that you diagram, use chart, you solve, you calculate, you come up with an approach. For example, you learn physics. Okay, let's build a robot with that gravity and robots and all these kind of things. You apply it somewhere, right? This is the third layer. And there are three more layers. These three more layers are very interesting. One is analyzing. Analyzing, it means, okay, you apply it to somewhere, and then you have to figure out relationships between different approaches, similar
Mm.
approaches, and bring all of them into your decision making, categorize them, because you are going to make a decision later. You have to
Mm.
examine, you have to compare, you have to organize, structuring, categorizing.
Mm.
This is building a knowledge base above all the things that, for example, you created multiple robots with different approaches. You want to
Yeah.
analyze the data that you extracted from all of them.
It's like the
Then you are ready.
effectiveness. Right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
effectiveness, exactly. And now you're ready for the next stage. The stage six is evaluating. This is the part that you do critical thinking or critical examine the information that you got it. You make the judgment, evaluation,
Mm.
and you do the judgment, test, criticism. You defend an approach, you criticize an approach. You become
Mm.
a kind of, that's a very interesting things. And finally, you are at the stage seven, which is creating.
Mm.
Now you
Right.
got all these kind of things. You search, you did all this kind of, now create something new, build, design, produce. So if you are an entrepreneur, you have to do all these kind of things. Market
Mm.
research, different approaches, and come up and plan, and then figure out value proposition, and then business plan, and then start to create it. These are seven stages of metacognitive, and metacognition, the thing that you know that always I love it. I always emphasize
Yeah.
on this. So, and each one of them has a lot of assessment techniques. So I'm not here to say exam is bad. Exam is just one out of many, and I'm so sorry that you guys just got one of it.
Wow, we have to do another episode on metacognition alone. I think it's such an interesting topic, and it's like, right when you were explaining it there, it's like I was just comparing, my school experience and playing a game, and I could see the difference, right? Like in a game, naturally you do it, you go through all these
Yes.
stages because you want to, there's such a desire in a game, even though it's almost like, I mean, to some sense meaningless in the end, maybe, right, for some people, versus education, which is more of like, I have to do it. I'm interested because somehow I noticed something in that, at least in myself, the way I was reacting to it. Do you think there's a role with regard to the fact that it's compulsory versus optional in terms of how easy it is for something to be, how should I say, moldable or changeable in the way that you talked about it in terms of its assessment, right? Like, the fact is, with, for example, something like a game, right? It's optional. I can choose to play a game. If I don't want to play a game, I don't have to play a game, right? When a game designer is designing a game, the reason he's putting in so much of this effort is because, guess what? If I don't put in this effort, no one's going to want to play my game because it's like no one has to play a game, right? But with school, maybe the fact that people are being complacent with it, maybe the fact that it hasn't evolved for so long is because it's compulsory. So like teachers, you were saying just now, like teachers don't care maybe, or maybe school educators or whoever, is involved in creating these systems don't care because it's like, school's compulsory, everyone has to take it. So I don't have to worry about making it better because everyone has to do it. You know what I mean? Do you think there's an element of laziness or lethargy in moving this along because of the fact that one is sort of more compulsory and one is more, I should say, sort of like an open market? It's free, it's competitive. There's almost like, there's competition, right, in the real world relative to like gamification and that kind of stuff. Well, how do you feel about that?
You just said something that I never thought about in this perspective. You use the term free market, then it triggers something in my mind. It's really interesting. You know what? When you look at from 19th century, we see three important thought model. First was fascism, the fascists. So we experience Hitler and many other places. Then fascism pushed away with community and communism, or communist. And then communists pushed away around 1970 by liberal concepts. And now we're talking about neoliberalism. So in the fascists, it was 1%, the control, there were things. So maybe you're lucky to get a benevolent dictator. And then it became community. No, everybody is same. Everybody is same. Even it doesn't matter. Even we lose the freedom, but if we can have the equilibrium between all the people, that's important. But then liberty came to the game. That no, we are free. We have the so freedom matters. Freedom matters. Even if we're gonna lose some resources, same access to resources. Now even liberty has some issues, especially in the last 10 years. Election, U.S. previous, and this and that. That shows that people became disappointed from this democracy and that kind of things that we see every day. And definitely, a school system is relevant because a school system wants to produce people with the trend of the day, right? So you said free market. You're right. Now freelancing economy, free market, but sort of I can see a school system still is in the time of fascism.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and a little bit of the community. It means like why should I give you freedom? But in the free market, I should give you freedom. That's an interesting
Yeah.
topic. That means a school is not doing in toward aligned with a free market concept, and that's something that suddenly came to my mind. And then and back to your main question is, it makes sense if you are going to take responsibility, you must experience the freedom. And if I'm afraid that you feel freedom and you cross your age 18 and you be a strong guy that I can't do anything that I want, so I want you to sit down and use that kind of just do it, because then you are a passive member of society. So
Yeah,
that's one way of thinking, right? And
exactly.
definitely when you have freedom, you are growing. You get
Mm.
self-awareness because you became matter. You should be matter. And in a game, in YouTube, in all the internet, you feel that freedom. Nobody tell you don't search this,
Exactly.
don't do that, right? So the answer
Yeah.
is yes, true. They're true. This hopefully is happening in society, that they're okay, that 18 years old, 19 years old people have that liberty and freedom more
Mm.
often from when they were child, even from their childhood time. They have rights. You as a human has rights even when you are 9 years old, you're 12 years old, or you're 20, or you're 40 years old. Those human rights should be defined. So that society definitely has a school that give you that habit, make it habitual to be free.
Nice. Wow. It's awesome. This is another really nice topic. We can talk about this
Yeah,
not in another
exactly.
episode by itself. This is a really
I
big
like
one
this one.
about human rights and how that relates to education. Wow. I love it. Awesome. That's great. So I think now getting towards maybe the end of this discussion, we've talked about the system itself and the grades. We've talked about the impact it had with students, maybe even teachers a little bit. We talked about educators. But there's one final party I think that we care a lot about at Keto Code, that's obviously also affected, and that is parents, right? So naturally, with this whole examination thing, we are there's a big maybe relationship strain experience between parents and their kids, right? Like, and I think all parents have felt this, all students have felt this. Um, many parents regard grades very highly, especially I think in Asian societies for some reason, and I think just competitiveness really, and they punish their children sometimes if their grades aren't good. Of course, this causes strain. Do you think there's any sort of healthy balance that, like, if it's properly managed, this sort of expectation of the parent, like that the children might be motivated in a sense, So is there a balance that, or because I guess we talked about the free market earlier, and this, in the free market kind of thing, there's like almost no expectations that you do what you want, right? Mm-hmm. And then the question is, where does someone get the push or the motivation? It has to come intrinsically, right? And so that's a bit like, it's super wild. It's a very big like wild card. You don't know what's going to happen. And then the examination model, it's too rigid. It's like, okay, I'm forcing you to look down my path and what I know and follow me, right? And then I want to know, do you feel like is there a balance? Is there a balance where the parents can somehow enforce some level of expectation for their kids in order to motivate them, right? But then allow them to be motivated in any way they like, right? Whether that is by memorizing or by writing or drawing or doing anything they like, right? Like, is there a balance in that, if it can be properly managed, the relationship between kids and parents and exams?
It's interesting. I think this is going to bring us to another topic for another video. You know what I like to say? That I understand that many parents, they are so sensitive. So I think this has something. It has something to the way a parent perceive the concept of failure. How failure is defined in that family. Or let's get a little bit bigger. It refers to knowing history of failure in human culture. It's really interesting, actually, Rohan. That's an interesting topic because it's so. For example, history of relationship in human culture is really funny. History of marriage, history of love, history of technology, history of failure. We have history of failure to know that in 12th century, how society perceived failure in compared with the 15th century, before industrial, after industrial revolution, and the very old time around ancient Greek. It's really interesting. And the time of the modern and now. So history of failure defines where we are living. If we're living in a time that failure is obviously it's a way to go to the next step, then you live in the best time, like 1860, 1870, 1890. You see that most of technology, Rohan, majority of technologies, excluding the internet that we are using this day, they're patent back to 1870, 1880. Toaster, bicycle, tire, car, electricity, telegraph, rails, many things, the iron, everything. It's unbelievable. I was searching. It's unbelievable. I look at around, bottles, thumbnails, everything. They're patent back to that time before we'll get into the World War and this and that. And the Einstein is for those times and all those kind of physics and revelation of science. It's a time that so good to make a mistake, entrepreneurial kind of the life. So, but if you live in some other time that miss failure perceived as sometimes, so we have to talk about it. So it's
Yeah.
very important. And what is our current life, we should talk about it, and why some cultures they perceive failure as a damage, but some culture perceive failure as inevitable part of learning. Failure is a treasure. If you don't learn from failure is true failure. Okay, so maybe that's a better way of saying this. So if you raised in such a family, grade never hurt you,
Right.
because
Exactly.
because you know what, that's what always I tell people. um, um, this is the our last question, right?
I have like one more last thing that I'd like to touch on, but that's maybe just a final short one. We can go with this one as the last
Okay,
main question.
so because I want to connect it to this very important concept, that how people look at failure, how they define failure in their life. For example, your mommy daddy, how they manage their failure. Is it like they get anxiety, they do the self-sabotage? That's very important.
Mm.
Why I did this? I'm stupid. I always do this. Imagine I always do this. I'm wrong. I'm like this. So if I do like that, so I have similar reaction to my children. I try to,
Mm.
because out of love, I'm trying to make sure they don't face with
Don't
failure,
repeat the same mistake. Yeah.
the same mistake. So
Mm.
so subjective, and at family level and society level. So there are some metrics. There are some metrics and measurements that we can compare cultures in different countries. I think
Wow.
some of them we discussed in some of our internal meeting about it. If you remember, Rohan, for example, one how a society is optimistic to future is a critical factor.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, how a society is positive to making decision for pleasure, not just to save and safety of the future. Long-term decision, long-term orientation, and masculinity. How much a society is more into male than the female. These are also important factors that define cultural reaction to failure. So it's very like that. It's not about the grade itself. Grade is just a number, temperature. It's about interpretation that parents, unfortunately, they apply to children, and especially society that exams, work, job offers, and opportunity, that one-dimensional shortcut. You see, you put all the things in one side, so too much anxiety and stress for child, for parent, for teacher, for school, and for society to raise one person till age 18 to make sure that he or she can be helpful for the society. And I want to end up with this concept that we talked many times about, the growth mindset and fixed mindset. If you are a parent that your child come to you and say, I got, for example, A, and if you react and say that, wow, fantastic, good job, you're awesome, you're the best, you are smart, I'm very happy that, you give 10 minutes a speech to your child that how good you are. So you know what's gonna happen? That child from that day live in anxiety. What if I don't get the A again?
Mm. Yeah.
because
So true.
because my dad defined you're so good because of that.
Because of
And
that.
this
Yeah.
is anxiety. This let the child don't take the challenge, don't do anything anymore, just stick with that A and conservative and this. But another parent says that, oh, you got A. Okay, makes sense because I saw 3 months you are reading. You are so good in hardworking. I like your hardworking. You did hardworking, hardworking, hardworking. You give 10 minutes talk about hardworking, not you are the
Mm.
best. This is called
Mhm.
growth mindset. You grow your child to focus on hardworking. So next time, if your child did hardworking, got F, oh, you got F. Oh, but I'm very happy you did 3 months again hardworking. Very good. I don't know, maybe
Mm.
that day you were not happy. I don't care. Or your
Yeah.
child doesn't do any kind of hardworking, get A because he changed his exam paper with his friend. Hang on a sec. Something is wrong. I don't like this. Tell me why. So if you are
Yeah.
such a parent, your child will be fresh, strong, life. You
Mm.
flourish the future for that child. So this is what I can tell you about this.
That's really cool. I think that's such a good piece of advice to all the parents who are watching. Like, focus on the process, right? Appreciate your children's effort and how much time and energy they put into the process of achieving something rather than the achievement itself, right? And I think that's such a like important thing. I think now I'm myself as a parent, obviously now like thinking about it, like, okay, how can I do that? How can I? Because it's so easy. I think with the thing about it with parents is, again, we're lazy, we're busy, we're tired, and taking the time to understand what another human being who you are looking after did is is an effort, and you have to put effort into that, because otherwise, you're right, they just hear you say, oh, this result is good, this result is good, and they just then eventually start to take shortcuts to get to the result and forget about the process that was actually super valuable, regardless of what the result was. I think that's super, super valuable ending for our parents. The last thing I wanted to just add on here is that, of course, we put a lot of hope and faith in parents, and we hope that they will do the best what they can for the kids. But unfortunately, we know that some parents won't, or they can't take the time. What would you say would be, because we know that so many students now in today's, world, they tie so much of their self-worth to their academic grades. We've had kids, commit suicide because they don't get good grades. It's super sad things. What would you say is your message to them, for these kids who, they're maybe trapped, or they're stuck a little bit with parents that aren't giving them that kind of enforcement that you just described? What would you say to them? What can they do? Maybe just to sort of send us off this message of maybe like hope for these kids who need to find a way to deal with the stress of the examinations. How can they look past this and move forward?
When you ask me this question, I can't think of how complicated became the world these days. There is a interesting report from I guess UN in Belgium, from Belgium, that in 2000, I guess 15, if I'm not wrong, that around 52 percentage of married couple, they divorced after 15 years. 50 percentage.
It's crazy.
So this means that world need different way to engage people. If you have a product that 50 percentage of users, they are not happy with it, you don't say okay. So this means that you have to create new products.
Yeah.
And this 50 percentage hold a lot of children, and then they live together. So I guess by default, we know every parent wants to do the best for their next generation. That's true. That's a fact. Biologically, we hooked to this, even if we don't have that wisdom, but we hooked to this. Animal does that. But the problem is when we are living in such a world that education system failed. Education system couldn't raise people to not have 50 percentage divorce in their marriage, to know how to select. Every 4 years we make a mistake in the election, we keep voting. We keep voting. When education system is not able to train us how to vote, we keep purchase nonsense stuffs. We keep manipulated by simple media and markets and this and capitalism. When we are living in such a kind of world, and then a COVID happened. So, and these kids, if we as an adult admit so messed up is the situation, I think we're gonna get a little bit humble to not be so sure about our ideas about raising our children. That's my advice. Accept that something maybe little is wrong with you and I and every one of us, and that is okay. Not admitting this is not okay. I see parents that they don't accept something like that. That means they think they know how to raise child easily, or then but the world is changing in a very complicated way, and we are so unsure about what is happening. If we get a little bit humble to just not be very sure, that means we question everything. We just question because every day we wake up, we just repeat what we think is correct. We don't question. They asked Socrates when he was dying, give us an advice. Give us an advice. And he said one thing: know yourself. So, you, dear parent, know yourself and revise and criticize. I mean, criticize in a kind of constant way your methods and approaches. I'm not saying is wrong or right. Doesn't matter if you are a really good parents, you have a lot of skills and knowledge, hopefully, but criticizing, self-criticizing in a proper and engineering way is really good. And if you think you need help, go and get some good therapists or read some books and over the internet and YouTube's. That's a very important thing. We should be a little bit humble as an adult to be able to see the answer. So that's the very first step. This is stereotype of I'm an adult and your kid you don't understand, I understand, should be changed. If I understand, universe was very different. We look at the election result, look at economy, look at a lot of other things coming from adult. I don't think children they went and vote. So the adult does that. Okay, so it's so obvious, so
Yeah.
obvious. So it's so obvious we make mistake in a very large scale in a scary
Yeah.
way. So yeah, I think just at the very beginning for me is like that, accepting this.
Nice. That's really, I think that's a great piece of advice, like for parents, and I think by extension to kids, right? This idea of questioning everything, no matter where you're getting the instructions or the force or the pressure from, you should always question, like, why is this right? Is this right? What is it better? Can there be something better? And you can find a way out of it if you know that there is no one standard that can really measure everything, and you shouldn't compare yourself to that. I think as long as you keep questioning every single thing you do, just like you said, whether you're a parent, whether you're a student, eventually you end up with the right answer for yourself. Eventually, hopefully, and maybe even one day for the whole society, which is something that I think what we're trying to do at Kidoko. So yeah, it's really
True.
nice. Thanks, Uncle Kurt. It was really nice having this conversation with
Welcome.
you today. It
That
was
was a very
awesome.
good talk. Very good talk. I liked it as well. It was nice, and I hope we I hope we can really come up with some good outcomes and results in our current societies and in Kidoko, the new generation, and then we come up with some new ideas for our future videos.
Yeah, exactly. We got a lot of ones from today. A lot of nice and new ideas.
So that's all. Thank you so much, your dear parents. This was another talk, Uncle Talk with Rohan and a school exam. I hope you stay safe and have a good day ahead. Bye bye.
Okay, guys. Bye bye.